I'm David Hazard, author, publishing consultant, and founder of Ascent, an international prep school for authors. We help writers to develop their books from concept to finish, and we help to launch their careers in publishing. Today I'm here to talk with Jay Foreman, author of a new fiction series for young adults called Frontline. Jay, it is great having you here today.
Great to be here, David. Thank you.
And I love the young adult series that you've worked on, Frontlines, and I'm curious to know what inspired you to begin this series of books for young adults.
Well, originally I started out writing children's books, mainly because I had children that age.
Okay.
And I wanted to write something that they would enjoy and be my first line of editing, if you will.
I see.
So
okay.
That was 3 years ago. When they were, and my daughter has grown since then. She's in 6th grade now, starting middle school.
Oh, my.
So I know. I feel like starting high school, but starting middle school. So I wanted to write something that she would still enjoy. So I dove into the young adult genre, and I've written the first 2 books of a series.
I see.
That explore what youth go through today. And another piece that helped me a lot is I do writing workshops in the middle schools and the high schools. So I got a chance to see firsthand exactly what the youth of today, what they're dealing with, what some of their issues and struggles, and what some of the pressures of today on them are. And
so you've got a daughter who's in middle school, and you're out there working with, coaching middle school writers, middle school and high school as well?
Yes.
Okay. So you're encountering issues that young people today are encountering. That sounds like a great inspiration to write a series to help young people.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
It really was. And there's just so many issues out there. One of the hardest parts was narrowing down what I wanted to focus on for the first and second book. The first book we chose to look at the issue of bullying.
Mm.
And I know that's a hot topic today.
Unfortunately, it is.
It really is. And again, being in the schools, I see it firsthand,
really?
which is sad.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to explore the issue of bullying, but also not just the black and white areas of it. We all know that bullying is wrong and shouldn't happen. But I also wanted to look at some of the gray areas, such as if you're a bystander, if you witness bullying happen, do you have a responsibility to do something or don't you?
I see, yeah.
So, I just want to take a look at some of the different aspects of bullying and look at it from a couple of different angles, kind of a real-world lens of what the youth of today are dealing with.
So essentially, this would help the young reader walk into a situation that they're liable to encounter in life and in school in particular, and help them to think it through, what they would do if they were confronted with a situation like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this isn't a book of or these aren't books of here's the right thing to do. These are books of here are situations that are happening today, and just getting the students to think about it. What is my role here, if there is one? How do I react to these situations?
Mm. I think what you're saying is important, because I think in generations past, young readers were much more open, I think, to having adults tell them what to think and what to believe and what to do. But I think your approach is really right, Jay, because my experience with young people today is they don't want to be told what to think or what to do. They want their opinion and their thought process respected.
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And that's what the message we're trying to get across here is not here's what to do, but here's something to think about. Here's something to explore. So hopefully when they're in that situation, they will have thought it through and they will be prepared to do what they think is the right thing at that time.
So it's a little bit more indirect guidance than direct guidance.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
Excellent approach. Now, you mentioned the first book is about bullying, but I know that you have written 2 books so far
Correct.
in this series. What is the second book about?
The second book is one, and I did a lot of interviews with youth today, and a big hot topic that's out there and I found not really talked about is a crisis of faith. A lot of kids today, whether they're brought up in Christian households or not, have a belief in God. That's all well and good until the first major tragedy happens in their lives. And when that happens, the youth of today is faced with that first, why do bad things happen to good people moment. And that's hard to deal with. It's hard for us as adults to deal with.
Absolutely.
So I take a look at that. Tragedy occurs in the second book, in this ensemble cast of characters that the reader has grown to know from the first one, have to deal with this. And each one, depending on their walk of life, their pedigree, their background, their beliefs, deal with it in different ways. And we just want to show, again, not preaching here's why things happen, because I don't know why half the things happen the way that they do. But we just want to show here's when things happen, explore these things, look at them. There may be more to it than just surface level thoughts.
So what is the tragedy that occurs in the second book?
In the second book, one of the main characters in the wrong place at the wrong time, and is the victim of a drive-by shooting intended for someone else. Ricochet bullet hits him in the head. He goes on to the hospital, slips into a coma, and then from there on to life support. And again, for kids that age, they're looking at it saying, we're just used to coming to school. Our biggest problems are, am I going to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend this week? Are we going to win the big game this coming weekend? Something like that is more of a heavy issue that they look at, and it really tests their faith. If they go to God in prayer saying, are you really there? And if so, how did you let this happen to one of our friends? We really go down a lot of different paths with folks being angry at God, folks accepting what God has done, and other folks just washing their hands of God. But again, it all comes back together in the end.
Well, and I think, what something has, we've had a sea change in our culture. In the past, when I coached writers who were working on young adult titles, we might have been dealing with issues of bullying back then, but not only, are we dealing with issues of crisis of faith, but in your second book, the way you've described it, we've really opened up to the fact that now, unfortunately, we're all dealing with the issues of potential violence all around us.
Absolutely.
And to, as you've described it, to have a character who is the victim of violence, that seems to me pretty real, a real issue for all of us today, parents, young people. Unfortunately, that has become a characteristic of our society.
It is, and and that was one of the harder parts about writing this. I found myself wanting to make this nice little Mayberry town where everybody gets along and it's happy endings. But in talking to students today out there and different focus groups that I talked with before I wrote these books, like you said, it's not that world anymore. And I wanted to make this as real as can be, because I know readers will pick up on that. If the story's not realistic, if the characters, the settings, if the experiences and circumstances aren't real, they'll know that. So I'm trying to make it as real as it can be out there. And we're not as insulated as, as books once showed that we were.
So I what I hear you saying is that young people are very sharp, and they're going to see through a story that's got a nice veneer, a nice patina finish put on it. And so as you're out working with young people, is your thought that unless you're really hitting them with frontline kind of issues, hence the series title, they probably wouldn't accept a book as being realistic?
And they've told me that.
Really?
They said we'll tune out after 5 or 10 pages. If we look at this and it's all sunshine and roses, that's not really what we're into these days. We want to be challenged. We want to see, okay, this is what I'm dealing with. How can this be applicable into my life?
And I think that's probably one of those edges that parents walk. We think as parents that there's a certain level in which we want to protect our kids, give them reading experiences, but maybe we're overprotecting. Maybe we're not giving them a little bit of exposure so that they can deal with issues in their own way at their own pace.
I think you hit the nail on the head, and I'm guilty of that as a parent as well. My daughter, again, 11 going on 12 years old, she's reading the more grittier things, the James Patterson novel, the Maximum Ride, the different ones like that. And as a dad, I find myself saying, how about going back and reading this Judy Blume book one more time? It's a little safer. I'll feel better with these things. But it's not where we're heading, and that's doing her a disservice, too. She's at the place in her life where she's ready to, she's living this life. She should be reading about it, too, and hopefully better preparing herself for situations down the road as well.
Well, and it occurs to me, as I said, having coached you through the books, that these books really are a good tool for parents to use in helping to carefully expose their kids to difficult issues in a way that before they have to encounter them in real life, they get a chance to think through and develop their own conscience, develop their own thoughts, their own position on what would happen if they had to encounter a situation. It seems to me you've done a really good service for parents.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, as a parent, I kind of had a firsthand or ulterior motive there too. But look at it along the same lines also as the parents are looking at this. It's not if, it's when things are going to happen.
That's
and they're
true.
going to have to talk to their kids about issues like this. And as you find in both the books, there's all kinds of answers out there, good, bad, and indecisive. And folks are going to look, to all different areas for answers, and it's just nice, they'll get some bad, some good, but it's good to have that parent, if they're available, to be there and to have that background and that concreteness.
Stability. Offering them a stability. Yeah,
absolutely.
Good. Well, and, you've done a great job of creating storylines that grab and hold young readers' attention. I mean, let's face it, if it doesn't have a good, solid story, if it doesn't grip their attention, if the pages don't turn, if it's not entertaining, a young person's going to put it down. And you've done a great job of creating stories that make the pages move. So,
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good job. Good job on that. So, was there anything that you discovered as you were working on these books that was it interesting or unusual discovery for you in the process of writing?
There was one issue that I really liked. It was, I guess you can call it interesting. In writing some of these scenes in the book, of course, we work together. Of course, I had the scenes all planned out, and sometimes when there'd be a dialogue between two of the high school students in there, Tag and Brett, they're two of the main characters in the book, I'd have a dialogue planned out between these two characters moving into another scene. So I would start writing this dialogue between the two characters and typing it out. Next thing I know, this dialogue has taken on a life of its own. It has its own legs. And I'm typing. It's almost like I'm listening to this conversation happen. And before I know it, I'm about 3-4 pages deep before I even move on to the other scene. So I told myself, okay, let me go back and edit some of this out. And when I go back and reread it, 9 out of 10 times I'd look at it and I'd say, wait a minute, these are actually conversations that would happen in a high school. These are conversations that I've heard in the high schools that I've been in running the writing workshops. So a lot of times, more often than not, I'd leave those conversations in there, leave that dialogue in there, and I felt like it gave the story another level of realism to it because it's real high school banter. The last thing I want is to write a book and someone pick it up and say, okay, this is a 40-year-old guy trying to sound like a teenager. So I was
that'd be pretty deadly.
Exactly.
Deadly.
So I was really trying to hone my inner teenager.
That's right.
My wife said that wouldn't be too hard. I'm not sure if that was a compliment or not.
That's right.
But,
well, so essentially what you found, I guess your discovery was that thing that every writer hopes for, that suddenly the characters take over and you're really, the genuine voices are speaking through your writing.
Exactly. I feel like it's a win when I'm sitting there typing and I feel like I'm reading the story instead of writing it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that happened a lot throughout both books.
That's got to be a good feeling as a writer.
It is.
Yeah. So what I want to ask you now is this. In 35 years of coaching writers, I have found it to be true more often than not that the process of working on a book does something to change the writer. Did you discover, did you have that kind of experience where working on the book changed you in some way?
I did. When I was done the first book, and even more so after the second book, I feel like I have a deeper sense of empathy for youth today, especially in seeing them firsthand in the workshops. They are dealing with so many issues today, and there's so many pressures coming at them from all different sides, more than I ever remember having when I was young, once upon a time. And they're getting these things from so many different levels, and there's so many social issues at school, family, community, church, sports, getting into a good college. There's just so many issues, and it's coming at them from so many sides. A lot of them, aren't sure how to deal with these pressures, and to make it even harder on them, I feel like it's harder for them than it may be for adults, because a lot of times they're still in the formative years. They're still just discovering, who am I? What makes me tick? What am I made of? That coupled with all the pressures, it's really hard on them. And I ever since writing the books, I try to take that sense of empathy and make sure that I'm seeing them for who they are and what they're dealing with in the workshops that are.
And I would think, too, that to bring that sense of empathy, now that you've got a broadened viewpoint of the pressure young people, it's got to have altered in some way the way you approach your parenting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, in the past where I may be quick to anger at something that's done, now I look at it and say, okay, what's causing this? You know, is there some deeper issue going on at school or an external pressure that she's facing? Because, you know, again, before I started, when I started writing the books, when I started interviewing youth out there, it was just amazing. You know, one after another, the folks that I talked to, here's just a different pressure, you know, or a different social issue that they're dealing with. It's really amazing.
Yeah. If there's one thing that you could leave your readers with, what would that be?
I hope it's that they think outside of the box. Again, this series has a definite Christian theme to it, but at the same time, the last thing I wanted to do was to preach in these books, to make them preachy at all. I wanted to take, you know, a Christian theme, put it in our real world setting. So I'm hoping they look at it, you know, and not walk away saying, okay, thanks, now I know what the right thing to do is. But let me think about, you know, if I'm in this situation, what is the right thing to do? Just to be forward thinking about these things, you know, whether it's not the situations that we've put in the books or it leads into other situations, to just be thinking about it. And if they can't figure out the answers, I hope they can take a cue from one or two characters in the book to say, you know what, if I'm still confused, you know, I can always go to God. You know, I can pray about this. And that's the beauty of it, as a couple of different characters find out, you know, God's a great listener, and he always has time for us. So I hope folks can take away that as well.
Good. And, you know, the adult characters that you have created, you have a coach who has a strong faith. You have a pastor. One of the main characters, his father is a pastor. But I found that you develop these characters so that they're not preachy, so that they give young people just good, wise perspective. And I think that's a tremendous achievement, Jay. I think you did a great job with this.
Well, thank you very much. It was a blast to write, and I hope I get to write several more.
All right. Well, thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, David.
I've been talking with Jay Foreman. If you want to find him online, you can find him at jwforeman.com. This is David Hazard, founding director of Ascent, a prep school for authors. If you have need of coaching services, if you're a writer, if you need services to design and develop your book, or if you need help launching your career in publishing, you can find us on the web at itsyourlifebethere.com.